All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Brent Fowler. I am the marketing manager here at Ellipse Solutions. This is the second iteration of the Dynamics 365 Town Hall. For those of you unaware, it's just a forum that we wanted to start to keep everyone in the loop on what's going on in the Dynamics 365 community. So let's go ahead and get started here. So this is a Dynamics Coach session. For those of you who haven't heard of Dynamics Coach, it is a training service offered by Ellipse Solutions. Ellipse Solutions is a Microsoft Dynamics 365 Gold partner. We are also an ISV. We have many products on AppSource, and we are also an end user. Our first Dynamics 365 for operations, for finance and operations implementation went live on December 2016. And just another reminder, we want to make this as interactive as possible. The whole goal of this webinar is to help get your questions answered. So please post any questions you have throughout the session in the chat box. So for the agenda today, we'll have a little Meet the Panelists section. We will cover some recent news topics, and then we'll get into the Q&A. So let's meet our panelists. First up is Emily. She is a project manager and business analyst, and she was a Dynamics user for over 5 years before becoming a consultant. Next, we have Dennis, and Dennis is a software solutions architect, and he has 11 years experience with Dynamics AX and Dynamics 365. We have Mikhail, who is a managing partner here at Ellipse Solutions, and he has over 25 years of ERP implementation experience. And finally, we have Todd, who is the regional director of business development, and he has over 25 years of experience in enterprise software. All right, so for recent news, we're going to do it a little differently this time in order to save the majority of the webinar for the Q&A. So I will just cover these topics, and we'll send detailed links to everyone after the presentation. So Dynamics 365 for Finance and Operations Enterprise Edition 7.3 was released in December. Power BI Premium now has support for large data sets. And there was also a new release for LCS in January of 2018. And as I mentioned, we will be sending out links to each of these topics if you guys would like more information. All right, so let's get started with the Q&A here. So we'll start off with the questions that were submitted before the webinar. As mentioned, if you guys have any additional questions, feel free to send them through chat, and we'll update the PowerPoint as we go. And hopefully we can get them all answered by the end of our time here. All right, so first up, are there any updates on the AX 2012 migration path? And this is for Mikhail and Todd.
So let's divide, good morning, you all. Let's divide the AX 2012 upgrade into 3 components. We have the code, data, and licensing. So with regards to code, there's no changes. It has been available for quite a few, actually 2 years now, over 2 years. The upgrade tools are capable and totally fine and useful. We've used it both for our products and for customers. With one big exception, it upgrades the code as is, so it places the code in the same state as it existed in the AX 2012. As you all probably know by now, Dynamics 365, the logic and the methodologies for development is quite different. The use of extensions will be completely enforced by this spring. With the spring release of D365, the development layer will be completely sealed off. So all development, all code, all custom code will have to live in extensions. That step of moving upgraded code, AX 2012 code, to extensions is still quite manual, and I don't believe Microsoft plans to automate this at any point. So when you plan upgrade of your code, plan on a two-step process. First, using Microsoft tools to upgrade the code from AX 2012 to D365, and then manually move it to extensions. The second component is data. This is actually quite recent piece of news. The data tools to move the AX 2012 data to D365 has become available a few months ago, around the AXUG Summit time, so in October-November timeframe. And the focus is on the open transactions and master data. So historical data is still not included in this tool and will have to be done for most companies probably through a means of some form of a data warehouse. Licensing, maybe that would be better. Percentage.
Okay, on the next slide, I think, Brent. So from a licensing perspective, I'm going to cover both 2009 and 2012, right? So the important things to really understand is, please remember, we're moving from a perpetual license fee structure to a subscription software as a service type model. And there's an additional component, obviously, for most of the Dynamics 365 customers. And what that means is it's the managed service piece. It's the infrastructure as a service. It's the platform as a service. So if you're beginning to sound like, or if this is beginning to sound like it's pretty complex, well, it is slightly. Okay, so in both cases, though, from 2009 or 2012, we have two different models. We have a named user model in AX 2012. We have a concurrent use model in AX 2009. So the proper way to really understand what you're kind of entitled to from a software perspective is to get with your partner. They'll go to the sales operation desk, and essentially they'll go through probably a Cray computer to get the conversion of however many AX 2009 concurrent use licenses, what that converts to from a Dynamics 365 name user subscription model perspective. Same thing for AX 2012, right? So key is just contact your partner. They'll work with Microsoft. They'll tell you really what you are entitled to. Now, once you know what you're entitled to, remember there's two pieces here, right? You have the managed service piece, the infrastructure and platform as a service piece that you have to consider. So once you start sitting down and trying to calculate what the Dynamics 365 licensing will look like, there really are two options. One is you've been paying maintenance, presumably, over the past however many years. One model allows you, well, not allows you, one of the options is you have that annual maintenance just continues. And you just add on the cloud services, that managed service piece, the infrastructure and platform as a service piece, right? So that's one option. Another option is you don't continue paying annual maintenance, but what you do is it rolls it all into the subscription pricing, right? So what this really implies is you're going to have to break out spreadsheets, right, to really figure out, including growth, et cetera, the best way for you to move forward. Normally, the spreadsheets that you'll create working with your partner or with Microsoft will be pretty self-evident, right? Microsoft has had to make certain assumptions when creating their kind of standard street price, some of the discounts for some of these SKUs, and again, working with a partner may unveil some creative options, right? So I'm going to throw out one really quick option because it may not be super apparent, right? So one of the options is the cloud add-on option, right? So you're continuing to pay maintenance. Seems pretty straightforward. Well, what we found out is you can actually reduce your annual maintenance and add on the cloud add-on subscriptions, because what Microsoft is granting you through the conversion process may be far more than what you actually need, right? So again, working with your partner who genuinely has your best interest at heart should be a good way of going about that. So the keys to take away are: contact your partner. They can kind of let you know what you're entitled to, work with the various options, and build in some growth, et cetera. But it's still going to require some work using basically spreadsheets and all that to really figure out truly what is the best option for you. And Brent, you can move on to the next Q&A.
Okay, so next up we have, is all of the AX 2012 functionality now included in Dynamics 365?
Okay, so this is Emily, and I'm going to be answering this question. And as of yet, all of the functionality has not been moved. You can track what is included in D365 and what is coming up with the use of the D365 roadmap. So I'm going to have Brent send the link to all of you to the roadmap. It's truly unprecedented, as Microsoft has never really published exactly what they're going to be issuing and developing. With this roadmap, you can see in detail what is coming soon and what has already been pushed out. With version 7.3, which was issued in December, there were quite a few new functionality pieces that Microsoft has been talking about. We at Ellipse actually wrote a blog about all of the different pieces, so I'll have Brent send you the link to that as well. But I highly recommend looking at the roadmap. And with the roadmap, you can not only see what's coming for finance and operations, but also for sales, talent, and all of the other D365 applications. So, Brent, I think we're good for the next one.
Can you use data entities to import data or transactions without having the database see who did it?
Good morning, everyone. This is Dennis. I can take this question. Basically, it's yes and no answer. It really depends on the which integration piece you're using for import. So if you use data entities from LCS, then the AOS itself is importing them, and basically the system user will be recorded in the database. If data entity is imported from the client interface, then the user who is logged in will be recorded against all records, database records imported. So it's important for if you have a solution or some functionality or reports that are built around this user feature, it's important to know who imported, or important not to see who imported it. They need to choose wisely the import path. And the other thing is OData is another way to import data. It's slightly, I guess, different, but OData uses the account that was authorized with Active Directory, with Azure Active Directory in AX setup. So the account who authorized, which is recorded against that Active Directory, will be recorded against those transactions.
How will the Ceridian alliance with Microsoft affect offerings in Dynamics 365 with respect to talent and payroll?
Okay, I will take this one. So this question is in regards to talent and payroll and the alliance that Microsoft has been talking about here. So what is happening is that for outsourced payroll options, there's an integration with Ceridian. It doesn't have any effect on US payroll in the finance and operations area. It's just if you choose to maintain your own payroll, there's a hope for a more generic integration tool that will allow customers to choose in-country providers over time. And this is for payroll that would be kind of outside of the US. There are no changes, and we've received this confirmation from Microsoft that there are no changes to the US payroll piece, but they are planning and moving forward with the integration to support US payroll between finance operations and talent. So two different pieces going on in regards to payroll. You have the US payroll and talent in the roadmap, and then you have the Ceridian option for payroll in other countries, which is currently not offered within Microsoft's current platform, but with this alliance, you will be able to take advantage of that. So hopefully more people will get on payroll. It's a really great tool that you get with your product.
Thanks, Emily. Next up, we have what's new with Power BI and Dynamics 365.
Yeah, thanks, Brent. This is Todd Kermoto. So this is really an interesting topic because anybody who's paid any attention to Microsoft over the past, I'd say, year and a half, has to have heard the digital transformation message. And when you think about it, Power BI, all the analytics, all the IoT stuff are critical to the long-term success, right? I mean, what's digital transformation if you can't interpret, if you can't see information and make sense of it and make better decisions? So while the Power BI integration into Dynamics 365 was initially very, very impressive, I think what we found is it's like trying to build out-of-the-box reporting for any company, any industry, et cetera. So it's just incredibly difficult. So you couple that with having very limited, unless you buy a Power BI Pro license or a desktop license to really do the editing, the creation that's really necessary to meet the needs of your company. Same thing with kind of drill down and all that, right? Getting to a level of granularity that helps you understand kind of the whys. It's not the what that has happened, it's why has it really occurred. So the good news is this is changing. In the fall release, Microsoft has introduced some drill down, right? So I think the level of granularity is going to expand, so it really will match what the user expectation is. But on the creation and editing side, I can't say for certain when it'll occur, but it sounds like it'll be in the spring release where this will be enabled, right? So you're not paying a king's ransom for Power BI Pro at, I believe, $10 per user per month at a street price. On the other hand, it's just a deterrent. It's just kind of disappointing that you're kind of alluring these great visualizations, et cetera, but people are saying it doesn't really match what I need, right? So Microsoft is absolutely stepping in the right direction. Now, how does this affect Management Reporter? Microsoft has stressed that Management Reporter is not going away. Same thing with SSRS. But when you start drawing a Venn diagram of reporting and business intelligence, there's no doubt Microsoft will use the expression we're trying to bring parity between Power BI and Management Reporter. So it's an important comment because if you look at the Venn diagram of what Power BI does and what Management Reporter does, yeah, there's some overlap, et cetera, but from a financial reporting, people are still very dependent on Management Reporter. well, you're going to begin to see far more overlap. Not sure what the future of Management Reporter is. That's Microsoft's comment. It's not going away, so I'm going to believe that. But when they talk about additions and parity and all this, and they're even talking about other financial reporting and consolidations that will use the common data service, it's really interesting how important Power BI is to, I think, the future of not just Dynamics 365, but Microsoft in general. So that's a little bit of an update, but I will just basically say on a weekly basis, there literally are new visualizations, and they're doing cool things to allow people to kind of basically build their own visualizations and share those with others. So on that note, a lot is changing, and mostly really for the good, I think, for the Dynamics 365 community.
Thanks, Todd. Next up, how many servers are needed for a Dynamics 365 implementation, and are any servers included in our subscription?
I'll take this. This is Mikhail. So with your D365 subscription, whenever you start the FastTrack program, which is the program, practically speaking, starting your implementation process, you will get allocated 3 different servers. 3 environments are included in your subscription. So typically it's production, test, and development. And the topology of this environment is very important. Everything from source control to promotion, code promotion logic is all built with this 3 servers in mind, with development, test, production in mind. However, for any implementation, that's not nearly enough. If you do any development, and by development, it's not just customizations, it's any data work, any reporting, any type of development work. The rule of thumb is typically 1 environment per developer. So this being in the cloud, at this point, it's much easier to deploy environments for a short period of time. Typically, on an implementation, you should also plan for at least 1 build environment, which will help you to promote the code, to prepare the build. We typically use 1 training environment for any training efforts, for any training classes for your user community. And with regards to development environments, like I said, it's 1 environment per developer. So it's not 100% of the time. You can kind of play and use these environments when needed and deploy them when development projects are being done. So there are generally 2 options to buy these additional environments on top of the 3 you have already, which are included in your subscription. So you can buy it through the same type of enterprise agreement. That would be more of a annual purchase, and you use them 24/7, or you can buy them through your CSP partner, cloud solution provider partner, and then buy them only when needed on demand. There's a balance, and generally financially, if your developer is working 8 to 10 hours a day, it's significantly less expensive to buy them through a CSP program. If you have a multiple shifts type environment, when the same environment may be used for multiple people closer to 24 hours per day, maybe it's better to buy more of a monthly subscription. Our typical development environment on the implementations runs, even in full use, say 10 hours per day, 5 days a week, maybe a few other hours here and there, it may run about $300 a month or so. And the other environments I mentioned, build and training, are totally, it makes sense to use CSP subscription because you will not use them all the time. It will have very limited use. So it's best to turn off, turn on these environments. A typical build environment should only be like $50 a month or so. So that would be the additional environments you will have to purchase, again, on top of 3 included in your subscriptions: production, development, and test. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mikhail. Next up, what are the requirements for Microsoft's FastTrack program?
Thanks, Brent. It's Todd again. So those that are familiar with the technology adoption program, there definitely are some similarities. So Microsoft has created some tiers. So let me first describe FastTrack. It's Microsoft support for the implementation, right? So it begins after the subscriptions are obtained. You have to have the minimum of 20, full or operations users or operations subscriptions. And it's tiered where anything under 150 subscriptions, it's kind of an essential program, right? And I don't want to make it sound like this is really kind of the little brother. It's limited, but for the vast majority of clients, it'll be perfectly fine, right? So what it includes are things like Tech Talks. So these are a series of webinars that take place over the course of your implementation. It has some workshops. So in the quote essentials, you have a pre-kickoff and a pre-go live workshop that takes place, right? And just having the attention of Microsoft it's good and helpful. And our experience again has been it's generally perfectly fine. The product is really, really stable. And so that's one option. So if you have less than 150 subscriptions, that's quote one option. Now going to the second option, and be careful for what you wish for, because just because you have over 150 and you quote qualify for this more extensive FastTrack program, doesn't mean that you necessarily should select it, right? So in addition to what I mentioned before, you have more quote touch points, and it just means twice a month or every 2 weeks, you will have meetings with Microsoft. Now, on one hand, sounds pretty good. On the other hand, those that have been involved in TAP before know that with that comes some responsibility, right? So Microsoft not only provides absolute additional level of support, they will require you to basically keep up and to do the tasks and responsibilities that have been assigned to you, right? So if you're uncomfortable with that, again, this is really supposed to be, quote, at your own pace. So Microsoft is pressing, right? So nothing wrong with that, and that can certainly be a very, very good thing, especially as you're talking even with your executives at your company, right? So the other really good thing that we've seen is the access to engineering resources, right? So when we went live with a client 16 months ago, it was actually Labor Day 2016, we had access to engineers. And if you ever hear the name Rado at Microsoft, trust me, fantastic, seemed to be up, 16 to 20 hours a day type of resource, right? So, and it was at a time, remember, the product hadn't been released. That was released actually November last year. So we had to go live over Labor Day, and having those engineering resources were definitely something that we appreciated. I think the product's definitely at a different stage now. So in addition to having engineering resources, more touch points, you have more workshops, right? So there's things like there's a solution milestone, there's a build milestone, there's a post-go live event or review. That's also part of the kind of the workshops that are conducted. So in general, the FastTrack program has been receiving, honestly, really, really good reviews because of how engaged Microsoft has been during the implementation to really try to help ensure success. So bottom line, once you're in a position to go through kind of procuring the licenses, make sure that you are speaking with your partner and or Microsoft, because you basically have to be invited. They have to say, hey, listen, this is a new customer, they want to be in FastTrack, right? So it's not in general just going to happen, right? So again, working with your partner and Microsoft should ensure that you have these resources available to you via the FastTrack program. Thanks, Brent.
Yep, thank you, Todd. A lot of good questions coming in. Just as a reminder, and I noticed we have a few new attendees, you can submit questions using the chat box. All right, so next up, any updates on the hybrid model and if the Azure license needed will still be needed? In other words, how much will it cost in licensing to upgrade to Dynamics 365?
Thanks, Brent. This is Todd again. This is going to be disappointing, I think, because on one hand, so the hybrid, it really includes kind of the edge, as they called it. This would allow maybe a manufacturing environment to run disconnected, still run and basically sync. Maybe you had a connection, an internet-related type connectivity or network problem. Right. So when this was first introduced, Microsoft pointed at retail. Right. They've had a solution where it really allowed, kind of the point of sale type of operations. So for retail stores to continue running and basically sync things. So it was exciting that they were introducing something that would accommodate that. It didn't seem that far out into the future. And I'm not going to suggest I have these resources that sign in writing, but word on the street is this doesn't appear like it'll be available until end of 2018. Right. So I don't want to be too hard or too difficult. This is a complex solution, right? When you talk about truly running independently and then resyncing, there's a lot of things that can basically be kind of in transit that have to be accounted for. So it's a complex model to try to solve. On the other hand, I think it still would qualify as being disappointing for what I'm hearing on the street. From a pricing perspective, I really don't have an update on that, but we promise that we'll probably give maybe a worst case scenario during the next town hall meeting. So on the licensing front, it's still very up in the air. I haven't heard anybody really commit to what the license cost will be for that model.
Okay. Next up, I understand there were some recent changes made to combat age discrimination in Dynamics 365 talent. What's new?
Okay, thanks, Brent. I'll take this one. So the answer to this question is really a great example of how Microsoft is committing to HR, and especially through the use of talent. So there's always been this concern every time I've done an HR implementation where HR is housing personal information in the system, and they have concerns that employees will be able to see the information and that folks could claim, discrimination for one of many things. In the D365 for talent, what's now available is HR has full access in their area to be entering the full date of birth for employees, so month, date, and year. And they're able to access all of the information from the HR workspace. When managers and employees log into the talent platform, their self-service spaces will only show the month and day of an employee's birthday and not the year. So that takes care of any claims that anyone could make about age discrimination, but continues to allow organizations to report based on age that they may need, and also allows, for things like tracking benefits and where HR really needs the year, but employees don't need to be seeing that, but can still celebrate birthdays and, have the baseline information for what that month and year may mean to them. So really happy to see Microsoft continue to address the HR space.
Okay. This would likely be another one for Emily. Where does employee data need to live if you have both Dynamics 365 for finance and operations and Dynamics 365 talent?
Yes, I will definitely take this one as well. So we've been speaking with some folks at Microsoft within the talent space and working with clients to implement both finance and operations as well as talent. In terms of data, your employee data, compensation, benefits, jobs, and positions needs to have their master records in talent if you're implementing both platforms here. What will then happen is your data can sync in full or just deltas into finance and operations for the things that you may need to track there. What is interesting is with the use of data entities that in talent, you can house all of the nitty-gritty details on your employees, but only bring over to finance and operations, maybe their names, address, their supervisors for things like workflows, but you don't have to bring things like birthdays that we were just talking about, or some of the other pieces of information that you may really be digging deep on with benefits and such. So really happy to be seeing this. And as the data goes from one area to the other, what it will do is from talent, it will push into Azure storage, and then the finance and operations will pull the data in. And you can, with the data entities, be selecting through templates what data you want to move from one to the other. So definitely gives you flexibility, and really nice for your HR team to have an area to be working and not be worrying about all the private information being seen by your operations team. So looking good, and hopefully more people will be using it.
And one more for talent.
Ooh.
How do I get an environment for Dynamics 365 for talent?
Okay, loving talent today. So similar to finance and operations, your talent environments will have their own project in LCS. So you would log in, you would be creating a new project. When you're creating that project, there's a drop down now where you're going to be selecting the product that you're going to be making the project for. So there is one for D365 for talent. There previously was a bug when you selected talent, but Microsoft has told us that the bug has been fixed. But if anyone has trouble when trying to do this, definitely reach out to the talent team. They are very responsive to this, but they have said that that bug is fixed. Regardless, once you get in and you make your project, your subscription comes with a test environment and a production environment that you can spin up the exact same way as your finance and operations environment. And then in regards to having both both finance and operations and talent. Within finance and operations, you can put a quick link on your main workspace to then open up talent, or you can have them in two separate tabs just for navigation, ease of use. But very similar to your other provisioning process, and happy to see Microsoft making it as easy and familiar as possible.
All right, thank you. When will Vendor Portal be available for Dynamics 365 for finance and operations?
Oh, I think I get another one here, Brent. The Vendor Portal actually is now available. However, it's not being called the Vendor Portal anymore. It's the Vendor Collaboration Workspace. It was deployed in December when version 7.3. And the functionality that's included there is updating vendor profiles. Vendors are able to review RFQs, respond to RFQs. There's a registration area, and the ability for vendors to answer questionnaires, and also for customers to push out notifications to the vendors. There will be in the roadmap some additions that are coming into this workspace, but it is there, it is available for use. And the best part about the vendor collaboration is there's no cost or license required for your vendors to access the site. So definitely something you should be using.
Thanks, Emily. All right, next up, will the product configurator tool be retained in Dynamics 365 for finance and operations?
This is Mikhail. I'm going to take this one. Not only product configurator is retained, it's being improved. It remains the main tool for product configuration within Dynamics product line. The main concepts still remain the same. It's an exception-based configurator. However, even in this latest release in 7.3, which was released just over a month ago, there were some interesting additional pieces added. For example, in brand new Z3 solver strategy for production configuration was added, in addition to the 3 strategies Microsoft had in the past, which was default, top-down, and minimal domains first. It's still all based on Microsoft Solver Foundation. Obviously, Z3 is a new benchmark, new test process. So the product configuration is evolving. So as we always recommend it to our customers, if you are building submarines or aircrafts, probably not good enough, and you would need a third-party product. But for large set of customer base within Dynamics ERP, product configurators is quite fine and a good manageable product. We have internally extended it for process manufacturing. So for those who are not aware, out of the box, product configurator in AX and D365 both only works with discrete manufacturing, only works with BOMs, not formulas. So we have a product we released where we enabled this solution to work with the process manufacturing as well, and enable it to produce formulas as well.
Okay, thanks, Mikhail. What tools do you recommend to create user manuals in Dynamics 365 for finance and operations?
Okay, I'll go ahead and take this one. This is one of my absolute favorite things about 365. So we are no longer suggesting to use Word documents unless you absolutely have to. The new focus is on the new and updated task recorder within finance and operations. What it does is allows you to turn on the recorder and walk the steps of your process. You can create as many different processes and as long of a process as you like. What's also great is as you're recording through the steps, you can right-click during the process to add an information note. So if you want to tell users, when selecting this drop-down, this is when you would select, net 30 versus net 45, or any, tidbits that you want users to have. And it creates your step-by-step process. You can export it to any documents as you would like, but it also saves the recording. So when users go into the system, if they get stuck or they're not sure how to run a process, they can pull up the recording and the system will go ahead and walk them through and actually will put arrows in the exact place where they can find the buttons or the links, and it'll make sure they follow the step-by-step process. So it's very cool. It lives within your LCS and can be used for anything. So it's right in your system, any process steps that you like. And I just think it is the greatest tool both for training new employees when they onboard, but also in your implementation process, because taking all those screenshots and making Word documents sure can take a lot of time. So time saver, and it lives forever. So thanks, Fred.
Okay, so we currently only have a few more questions to cover. So please use the chat box to submit any additional topics you would like to be addressed before we end the webinar. Next up, where did view details go?
I'm getting a lot of good ones today. So this is a question frequently asked, and I actually had a user during an implementation tell me that they didn't like 365 because they lost their view details. So let me explain this in a little bit more terms, is that in AX 2012, when you were in a field, you were able to right click and you would get the options to view details. So it's up on the screen right now. What view details did was bring you to the list of the configure dropdown. So let's say, as an example, for net terms, if you right clicked in the net terms box from a vendor and did view details, it would bring you to all of the different options that you have, and you would be able to configure any additional terms. If you go to the next slide, you're going to see what happens in 365. So what folks were finding is that if they were right clicking on the drop down, like in the box, that nothing was happening, that it was looking just like a web page, and it wasn't, it was asking you if you wanted to print or save something, but it wasn't giving you the view details option. What you have to do in order to get view details, it hasn't gone anywhere, it's still available. You just have to click a little bit further to the right and actually click on the drop down arrow itself in order to see view details, or you can right click on the label. So in the second screen, you'll see if you right click on that item, it will also bring up the view details. So it hasn't gone away. Don't think it's something Microsoft got rid of, because it is a very handy, efficient tool. It's just you have to click in a little bit of a different area. So hope that helps for everyone. It is still there. Enjoy.
Okay, next up, we have kind of a topic here that has 3 additional questions to go along with it. So the next 3 questions are all about the restricted admin access on development VMs with the platform update 12. So let's go to the first question here. What should I do if I need to install additional tools on the box? Are there any alternatives or workarounds?
Thanks, Brent. This is Dennis. So for those who may not have heard, this was news from, I think, November's release, that Microsoft has restricted admin access to the boxes that they host on their account. So when you get your D365 licenses, Microsoft gives you, with those licenses come a few boxes besides production. And those boxes, those virtual environments, they live on Microsoft's account. And we used to be able to connect to them and to just be admins on them. So Microsoft changed their mind, and they had some security concerns about giving the admin access to non-Microsoft employees. So they made the different, they basically removed admin access and called it a restricted admin. It's not a full admin, but still has pretty powerful tools within the VM. So in cases, but the question here is, if you need to install something in that VM, for example, you're working with your sandbox and you need some additional tool, maybe a web debugger or some kind of file parsing tool, or your application of some sort, you will not be able to do that. For that, you need admin access to install additional software on the box. So, but the key is that Microsoft only restricts this to the boxes that they are hosting themselves. So the answer to this question is, you do have alternatives and workarounds. All you need to do is you need to just provision a D365 instance on your own Azure account. Alternatively, if you have a server in-house which can host VMs, you can download on-premise VM and install it on your server. And there you have admin access and everything, and you can do whatever you want with those boxes and install and test just like with Microsoft's boxes. The restriction only applies to the boxes hosted on Microsoft's site, on Microsoft's account, I should say.
Okay, and question 2. Will there be any problems synchronizing with TFS?
Yeah, so this will not be a problem. TFS lives. Usually, we have to with the clients we work. They usually use VSTS. It's a cloud solution for TFS. But even if you host your local TFS and you just expose it outside of your local network, you will still be able to connect. The admin access is not required for this.
Okay, and question 3. How can we install a deployable package without admin rights?
Yeah, this was a good question. It was first asked of Microsoft even before they released this change, because previously on the boxes before PU12, we needed admin access to run that script that deploys software packages. So if you're trying to install a build or you're trying to install a vertical solution on your test box or dev box, you needed admin. So Microsoft changed their scripts and they adjusted them for this change. So now you can run a deployment script without admin solution. You still need to RDP to the box with this restricted admin credentials available on the available on LCS. But once you log in with that account, you will be able to deploy running the PowerShell script. And you can find some more information about the exact command you need to run. But that script is deployed with the box, and that script does not require full admin. Restrictive admin is good enough.
Okay, great. So it looks like we're out of questions for today. Thank you all for attending. And if you have any additional questions or would like to discuss Dynamics 365, please send an email to solutions@ellipsesolutions.com. And as mentioned earlier, we will send some additional informational links your way. And again, thanks for attending today's webinar, and be on the lookout for your next invitation to the Dynamics 365 Town Hall. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye now.